Hello, I'm Andy Stapp, Fabricator here at Detroit Speed. In this video, we're going to walk you through installation of the deep tubs, QUADRALink, and subframe connectors on your 1968 through 1974 Nova. Let's get started. The new mini tubs do not have provisions for this lowest panel. So what we're going to do is where our line comes across here, we're going to come in up a good inch above what we're looking at for the floor of the trunk and cut across. That will be our cut line. And then we'll grind it and fill it in and make a lap joint here. We'll leave all this material in the car. It stays in place. Mini tub comes down and we will tie into it here. And now with all the cuts all the way around the parameter being taken care of, we can gently remove the inner factory tub and discard it out of our way. Now after we've cut the inner tub, I have a little bit of a flange here because I didn't get right up against the edge of my ZIZ wheel. So I'm going to come back and grind that edge off so the new tub will lay up there flat. I don't want to take the seam out of here. I'm going to leave that seam, the flat material from the stock tub, and set our new tub right up against it. Gives us a little bit more thickness, a little bit better place to weld to. Originally, when we laid out, we left room for a 3/4 inch flange along this section. It's the only section in the whole car we can do a flange, but we're going to come in with a set of duckbills and break a flange under on this. With all of our original factory tub removed and cut out and clearance, it's now time to dry fit our deep tub, go back into location with it, make sure everything clears. It's a good fit. I've now transferred from the template to a piece of 1/8 inch steel. Put a flag on it just so I can hang on to it to make it easier to locate it in place. I'll grind that off when we're done. And it will fit in with a slight lip on the back side here so that it doubles over and gives me a little bit more material there. Our filler pieces are now welded in place. I'm going to come in and grind them smooth and get it ready for our deep tub. All right, we're now ground clean. Everything's prepped and ready for our deep tub. I'm going to install it, and then we're going to come in through the trunk side, mark the back side so we can poke holes in, so we can weld through the inside like spot welds and attach to the deep tub. I'm going to put a reference line around the inside seam of the deep tub so that I know exactly where to come back to. It'll double check me on both sides, and I'll have a return point. We marked the lines in the car, exactly where everything overlaps. Now I'm going to come along and poke a 9/32 hole . I pre-drilled on the last fitting a few location holes, come in with Clecos, hold it in place so that I can clamp everything in tightly to weld it up. Now we're going to grind these welds off. We went from a pattern to a part. When everything's cleaned off, that'll sit right there, weld in place. Be the same as the original patch that was there from the factory. This is the original deck lid hinge mount. We've fabricated a new one in order to take its place and attach right into place right there. I laid out the marks on this side 2 inches, the same as the other side when we cut it out. Now it's time to cut on this side. With our stock tub removed, it's time to install a cross member. First step in this is to get a center line across the back of the car. So we're going to come from a quarter panel on each side, come to center, and then 17 3/8 out off of center each side for our first lines. From our center line, we're out 17 3/8. From that 17 3/8 line, touching the tail light panel, we're going to come forward and put a mark at 43 3/8 for the front edge of our cross member. As you can see, I already have both lines drawn out. It's because the floor pan is not flat. I came in with a flat piece of straight edge, clamped on one side, held on the other side, came across with my Sharpie, drew my line that way. The second one came in with a 1x2, level, got it square and level, tacked it in place, welds on each side. From that point, I can drop the straight edge straight down, squeezing here tight. I can mark the back side, my straight edge, and that line transfers all the way across, and I know it's flat and parallel with where I need to be at a 6-inch span which is the dimension of the cross member. For instructional purposes right now, we've mocked up the right side tub in place. And we're going to set the center cross member in. Everything is fit, it's all ground clean to it, and we're going to do a final fit. The car is already sitting level, front to rear and side to side. So now that the cross member is set in place, I want to make sure that we're level side to side, as well as front to rear. Everything's in good place there. We can mark from underneath, and that's our next step. One more thing to be aware of. So at this point, the wheel tub will connect to the center cross member. There's a small gap in there because we need an 1/8" filler plate to go between the two. This will weld in to the end of the cross member, pushed up into place, located, weld in, and then our tub will plug weld from the outside back to this plate. All right, without moving the cross member, we're going to take a Sharpie, just mark along the edges so I can remove excess material. We leave you long because all the different cars are slightly different. Now that our cross member has been cut and fitted and ground, I'm going to weld the end plate in that we discussed earlier to go against the end of the tub so that we can butt weld right to the end of this cross member. Now that our cross member is installed, it's time to move on to the track bar mount. It goes in on the passenger side of the frame. up in between the cross member, the clamp, lock it and hold it to the frame. Might need to be trimmed along the top edge. What you're looking for is for the mount to touch against the bottom of the frame rail on both sides, up into place. With the track bar mount in place, touching the frame here and here, it should be plumb and plumb. Please keep in mind, the car is already level on the lift. Our track bar mount comes with a gusset welded in right here. Due to the inconsistency in the location of the factory frame rails, I had to remove that gusset and create a new one to go back in the same place that will fit correctly. I just made it out of a piece of 1/8" steel. It goes right there, I weld it in. Now that we're tacked in, I will completely weld around all the areas around the surface on this one and fill in that side of the cross member. Now that the center cross member is installed, it's time to move on to installing the passenger side deep tub. First thing on this car, we had some corrosion and some torn up material down here. Your car will not require necessarily that we put a bottom panel in it. They do not come as part of the tubs. This car needed one, so I fabricated up a new lower panel, and I'm going to install it into place before we put the tub into its location. Because of differences in frame rails and in inner tin work on the factory cars, we're going to have a flat surface for our tub to seal up against. So we have to make a template, transfer it to a steel piece, and then our steel piece sits up in place, locks in, gives us a nice flat surface for the inner tub to go up against, and then we have a filler piece that goes in the frame rail here next, and we'll get to that in just a second. And as we did with the last one, cardboard template, fits nicely into the area, transfer out to the steel, roll the corners on it so they have a nice, easy internal fit. With our closeouts welded in and ground clean, it's now time to install our right side deep tub. We'll go in dry fit, we'll mark top and bottom around the points on the car so we can come back and put plug holes into it and then be ready to weld it in. In the initial stages of installing our DSC deep tubs in our Nova, one of the first things we had to do was cut the rear seat brace loose from the original tub. Now it's time to put that connection back in. New steel brace made to go in place. I started with a piece of template paper, fit it to the car, transferred it to steel, made my steel piece fit the contour of the package of the seat back. Now we're ready to go. The first step in installing the DSC QUADRALink is to get a center line on our transmission tunnel. We'll start at the pinch weld. And then we'll back that up, making sure from the door pocket (27 7/8 from each side there as well. In the rear, we do the same from the pinch weld across. I have 23 3/4, 23 3/4. We'll make my center mark. Then we'll back it up and come off the quarter boxes. 27 1/4, 27 1/4. That way I know I'm centered. Next, we would remove our lower seat back brackets, but because this car has a new floor pan, those are not in existence. So we, for the video purposes, will have to skip that, but follow your direction sheet and it explains to you how they have to be cut, and we'll reference that again in a little while. Now that I have these lines located for my template, I'm going to come and drill the corners, look from underneath, and make sure we're lined up properly with the frame rail flange. In order to install our upper link pocket, I had to build a flat into the floor so it'll set down where it's supposed to be, go along with this surface right here. I also had to adjust the bend at the back of it because this floor pan has already been replaced. Things are a little bit off and different. When I get it in place, the next issue I run into is the fact that my seatbelt hole is not where it's supposed to be in the mount and in the bracket. I believe it's changed in the floor. We're going to adjust the bracket for that. I'll move down. This is my new center hole. I'll weld this hole up. I'll put a hole here, accommodate for it that way. I have already started a few of my initial weld plug holes in the mount because I had to use that to hold the floor down at one point when it wasn't attached. Now we're going to go through, while I have it out fixing this, I'll go through and drill all these holes in the same time and have everything ready to go. When we come back in, we can weld it in place. All right, I have now relocated the hole for the seat belt, made everything else up in here, drilled all my holes for plug welds. In order to drill these down into the frame through the sheet metal, which they need to attach to the frame, I'm going to come in and drill 4 corners and bolt this in place just to hold it temporarily, and then we'll come back and we'll drill all these holes. Drilled my holes through so I have a good grip in the frame and put it back in place. I'm going to drop my bolts in the corners one more time, lock it down, make sure everything's where it's supposed to be, and we can start tacking this side in place. What we're going to do now is tack weld this one in place, and then we're going to go over and mount the other side, and then we're going to reference both of them, check one more time, and then we're ready to weld it in place for good. All right, now on this side, same as the other side, we want to make sure we're flat and level first. A little off. Now I'm there. 13 3/8 in the front. 13 3/8 to the center line in the rear. Check front one more time. We're there. I'm up off the floor, so I'm going to hold it level. Still get a reference line. Once more, I'm going to cut a little on the inside of the line. When it's tacked in place like that side, you can come from the bottom side and grind it to the edge of the pocket and get your lines nice and straight and true with the pocket from the bottom side. Okay, I have now fixed the seatbelt hole, drilled through our plug weld holes down through the sheet metal to get a hold of the frame rail. The pocket's in place, level. Our dimension is correct. From the side, 13 3/8, both places here. Tacked it in place, got it level. Now it's time to double check all of our measurements before we weld this in and make sure everything's in the exact right location. For our first measurement, with our pockets bolted in place, bolts through the pockets and a string hanging from the back side of the bolts, I'm going to come in with a square off the pinch weld, run forward till it touches my string, measure from here to the front bolt, 9 5/16. That is well within range. Repeat the process on the other side. The next point of measurement, from the front edge of the frame, come back 11 3/4 inches. That is the center of our upper pocket bolt. Mark there. Same thing on the other side. Straight edge from these marks up to the bottom of the bolt. 4 7/8. 4 7/8. That tells me I'm consistent in height off the bottom of the frame rails on each side. I'm consistent 4 1/2. I'm comfortable that it's in the right place. It's now time to start welding them in. Included in our swivel link kit are these 2.42 inch long spacers that go in this, bridge this gap. They keep everything from closing up when you weld it. This one's already installed or inserted. The DSE body mount kits come in a standard height and a half height. The half height lowers the body onto the subframe 3/8 of an inch. For this project, we will be using the half height body mounts. This is our hardware kit that comes along with the subframe. 1/2 inch hardware on this side goes to the core support. 5/8 hardware in the center bolts the subframe to the front of the chassis. These two bolts are longer than these two. These go to the front mount. These are your rear mount underneath the car. We'll go from here. We can bolt these in place on our subframe and then connect it to the chassis. I'm going to install our mounts into the holes. Again, our longer bolts go to the front. A dab of never sees will make you happier in the long run. We're going to put it on and protect the threads a little bit, going into the old threads with a stainless steel bolt. This assembly bolts in from the bottom. Bolt from the bottom, stainless steel washer with a taper towards the bolt. Cup mount goes underneath, all comes up through the hole. With the body lowered in place, it's now time to assemble our bolts. 1/2 inch spacer is a Nova spacer only. Has to be required for all Novas. It goes in place on the top of the mount. Through a spacer and up into the hard part in the chassis. Same for this side, 1/2 inch spacer. These are only on the front. The bolt started there. And now it's time to go underneath and do the two rear ones. Rear one goes in the same way. Bolt going up, cone spacer with a cone tapered towards the head of the bolt. And our black cup in place, goes up through the mount into the chassis. Get this one started and repeat the process on the other side. We're going to snug both front bolts. Do not tighten them yet, just snug them up so we can lift the subframe. At this point, we need 4 plumb bobs. The first 2 on the front will go around the lower control arm front mounting point. Loop it around the nut, let the plumb bob drop down. We'll do the same thing for the left front. This tapered flare hole is a factory measurement hole. We're going to come off of it with a string with a plumb bob out of this one, and the same thing on the left rear. With the plumb bobs hanging down from the car, this is a good time to grab your friend, wife, neighbor, neighbor's wife, whatever we have to have a helper. Crisscross the car, crisscross the plumb bobs. We are at 92 7/8. We'll criss around and see what the other side comes out. And amazing, we're at 92 7/8. That means the subframe is square with the body and in proper location. We can move on. Now that our subframe is plumb and square with its body, it's time to tighten the bolts. 85 foot-pounds on all 4 bolts. With our subframe bolted on, the next step is to install our subframe connectors. First, locate our template, cut it out, and we will follow the dimensions on the template to locate where we're going to cut in the floor for our subframe connectors. The first dimension we're going to follow is a 15 1/8 from the back side of the subframe for our first mark. We'll come 15 1/8 from here. The next dimension from our template is 5 1/8 inches off of the pinch weld over for a mark, and at the rear 5 inches from the pinch weld over for a mark. That gives us our 3 points, and we can come up with our template, catch those 3 locations, and mark in for where we're going to cut. Place our template on our marks. Draw around it, and that will give us our cutout lines. Now that our template line's drawn, we'll come in and cut to the inside edge of the line, grind out to it to fit our subframe connector in place, and repeat the process on the other side of the car. With the hole cut out in the floor pan, we can come up and dry fit our subframe connector into place, check all our fitments, make sure everything is located where we want it. Once we're satisfied with everything there, we'll come up and attach the front bracket. The subframe connector end cap welds onto the front side and caps off the open end of the subframe connector. We'll go weld it in place, come back after that, and attach the front subframe brackets, line them up square and true. We'll tack these in place, and then we'll weld it all up on the bench. driver's side subframe connector installation is the same process as the passenger side. We use our template, same marks, drew our lines around the outside, time to come in and cut it now. With our rear end in position, wheelbase set, side to side centered in the car, and at ride height, we can now come in and install our upper shock mounts. Based on the location of the cross member, there are a few things we have to consider in locating our upper shock mounts. First is the outside diameter of the coilover. Second is center to the edge of Schrader valve, so we make sure we have enough clearance. And third, we have to consider the spring to the track bar mount and make sure we're not going to have any interference there. Now that I'm satisfied with the location of my shock and clearance around it, I'm going to come in and just mark corners of the bracket so I can come back and tack them in place without the shock in there so I don't get weld splatter on the shock. We will need to remove the rear end housing in order to weld the shock mounts in place without getting any spatter on the rear end. But before we do that, I want to come in and locate the rear anti-roll bar mount and have it taken care of with the rear end housing in place. The first step in installing our rear anti-roll bar is locating the 4 bushing mounting holes in the bottom of our shock mounts per instruction. As you can see, we already have our 4 marked and ready to drill. In order to mount our frame mount for our rear anti-roll bar in this location, we need to have a dimension 12 inches off the center of our axle tube. I know the tube is 3 inches, so I take 1.5 inches off to get the center, and I can come forward and put a mark at 10.5 inches. With a straight edge, with a level, and a square, we'll transfer the line, make it vertical. Now I'm going to slide my bracket on. The raised part goes to the inside, flat to the outside. Line it up on the center from the vertical line, tight up against the frame, and locate my holes. Need to center punch and drill these 3 holes, 17-30 seconds, but we'll pilot drill them at 1/8 inch. Now we'll finish these holes out at 17:30 seconds. Now we're going to use our drill jig with a 1/4 inch drill bit and drill through into the other side. We want to make sure that we're flat, level, and straight front to rear. We want to drill the outer 2 holes at 17:30 seconds, correct size for the nut certs, but the center one on the inside is 15:30 seconds. The outside center one is 5/8. I'm going to go in and drill the 17:30 seconds outer 2 from the inside rail first. And we'll come to the outside, drill the outer one at 5/8. We need to insert the 5/16 nut cert onto the nut cert tool, making sure that the lock washer is in place, 2 washers on the outside on the bolt. Tighten up until it gets tight. We'll back it off. Our nut cert is inserted. We'll repeat this process for the outside 4 holes. With our nut certs inserted in the outside 4 holes, we're ready to install our bracket. 3.5 inches on center is a very good starting point on this. It keeps the sway bar from getting into the frame. At this point, all your fabrication work is done. If you have any questions, you can contact us at 704-662-3272 or check us out on the web at www.detroitspeed.com. Thank you for watching.